Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. My guest in this edition is the highly successful graphic designer Pavel Fuksa. If you've been to Prague in recent years, chances are high that you've encountered Pavel's work. That's because he's responsible for the visual side of a series of official posters welcoming visitors to the city and encouraging them to behave with respect. The 42-year-old has in the past worked for several of the world's major brands, including the likes of Nike, Facebook and Lego. What's more, Pavel Fuksa is deeply interested in soccer. So when we met in the downtown area, I also spoke with him about which Prague club has had the most visually impressive strip and when. That's in this edition of Prague Talk. We're speaking here right in the centre of Prague at Mustek. You're just telling me you don't come often to the centre of town.
No, not really. I used to come here when I was like 16 or 15 because it was like the centre where everything was happening and everything, like shops and just walking down the streets and everything. But right now, when I'm in my 40s, as I might say now, I try to avoid those streets. I just I don't like the hassle. I don't like the crowds and. It's probably because I'm too old now.
Well, the reason I wanted to speak to you is because you've done some campaigns for Prague tourism. Visitors to Prague will know your work. Could you tell us some of the campaigns you've worked on?
Yeah, for the Prague tourism project, 4 or 5 years ago, we've worked with Dora Prozincova, who's a brilliant, fantastic copywriter, as well as Ivana, now I might say Fuksova, who's became my wife. So the three people together, we create our studio. We make our studio. And we kind of wanted to develop a sort of a consistent visual language for the incoming tourists to Prague to inform them about what to do, what not to do in a sort of a friendly and non-preaching way. Yeah, we wanted to do similar campaigns as to those that are in Tokyo or in Barcelona, where tourists come to the city and there's a friendly reminder on, for example, I don't know, don't do this. We'd be happy if you didn't do this and that.
Wasn't one of them saying Prague is the mother of cities?
Yes,
treat Prague like you would treat your own mother.
Yes, that's actually my favorite visual from the campaign. Treat the mother of cities as you would your own mother. It actually doesn't inform of anything particular. It's just an overall feeling that you should keep.
Why is there a need for that? Because to be perfectly honest, a few times I saw that and I thought, do other cities also tell people how to behave or tell them to be quiet and so on?
They actually do. They do, yeah. I've been in Japan in August this year, and we've seen so many posters reminding mainly foreign tourists what to do, what not to do, how to behave in public transport, how to stand on moving on the escalators, what level of volume to keep in a tram or subway car. So I was quite surprised on how that we're somehow lacking behind in the amount of rules and informations that we are trying to pass on to tourists.
What's your sense of how effective that kind of campaigning has been?
I have no idea on how effective this campaign was or is. I just keep hearing and reading that campaign is clever, that it's interesting, that it's nice. And that both tourists and locals enjoy that. It's not threatening, it's not overwhelming. We kind of aimed for a sort of a limited color palette where we wanted each of the visuals to be instantly recognizable, that both tourists and locals will know that it's the city of Prague who's talking to them. And we always aim for pairing the clever and also very witty visual with the text of the same wittiness, if I might say.
And I presume also this is a project running for several years, because otherwise it makes no sense, right, to create this visual identity.
Yeah, on the way here I was counting and I think we've created like 12 or 13 visuals so far. We've prepared some new ones for the New Year's Eve, and there are some long-lasting ones welcoming tourists at the Prague airport, like from the basic welcome to Prague over after 10 keep it down, or don't drink alcohol in the streets, or don't stack the electric scooters everywhere you fancy.
It must be a cool feeling when you arrive in Prague. You get off the plane, then you see your own work.
Yeah, it is. Even fancier is the amount of pictures my friends and sometimes enemies send me when they land in Prague. It's like, it's Fuksa again, or Pavel, look at that. You know, you're here. We like it. It's always a nice and warm welcome for them.
You've worked with huge international brands, Lego, Nike, Google, Facebook, even Barack Obama.
Yes.
How does working for Prague compare? I presume they pay you considerably less.
They pay me considerably less, but on the other hand, it's a wonderful team we work with at the Prague Tourism Office. So it strikes a nice balance.
Do you have a kind of sense of mission that you are helping Prague to be better?
Well, I don't know if there's some sort of a mission. I'm trying to do the best work I can.
But I mean, do you want people to be quieter? Do you want people to behave better, personally?
Yeah, personally, as I'm getting older, I'm leaning towards those sorts of rules and actions. Yeah, so I presume I do. Yeah.
You've also done work for Prague 3, where I live, and I'm happy to say that I possess copies of some of the work you've done for them. Could you tell us what you have created for Prague 3?
Yeah, that was in 2021, amid COVID, the high peak of COVID. And at the same year, Prague 3 celebrated a 140th anniversary of Žižkov being promoted to city status. So we decided to have some fun with it. And we've turned the celebration into sort of a cheeky game by declaring Žižkov a micro-nation.
Which some people already consider, right? They say the Republic of Žižkov. Exactly. People are proud of their neighborhood.
Exactly. So we've created passports and transformed around 30 Žižkov landmarks into sort of a quotation mark national landmarks. And we've then invited people to walk around and collect passport stamps. Then, when you had your passport filled with all 30 stamps, you were eligible to a Žižkov citizenship. Then you've received a birth certificate, you've received a folder with stamps, with postcards, with stickers, and everything that a right and true Žižkov citizen should always have on him or on her.
I presume people love this stuff. It's such a great idea.
Yeah, they did. The game ended with over 2,000 people, actually with over 2,000 citizens, meaning that over 2,000 people actually finished the whole game. We then created some extra stuff like city/country maps with circular subway line, with over 30 subway stations, which were over fixtures. My favorite was HFK, which was Hrob France Kafky. We've created tourism posters, we've created T-shirts, hats, everything. It was a nice game, and despite my sort of a long-standing, I must say, aversion to Jara Zimmermann's works and games, I have to admit it felt a little honored that the people compared this project to the work of this intellectual giant.
Souvenirs are obviously big business in Prague. You see them everywhere you go. With your very cool kind of semi-retro style, I think you could clean up, you could do really well. Have you tried that kind of area, selling tourist souvenirs?
Unfortunately, I did not, and I wasn't approached by any institution or anyone. I think I'd do good, but I just didn't have the time or opportunity yet.
You're a very well-travelled guy. I wanted to ask you about the look of Prague. You mentioned earlier you were in Japan and you've been all over the place, you've lived abroad. When you look around, what do you think of the standard of, for example, shop fronts in Prague?
It's obviously very wild, because we're still, despite the fact that we hate it, we're still a part of Central to Eastern Europe, and the visual standard actually reflects that. So I must admit I envy and enjoy the work of Veronika Ruth, I think, who's a keen fighter for the quality of shop fronts, shop windows, and the overall visual standards and visual levels of not just Prague but all Czech city streets. I must say I find it appalling, especially when I walk in the very center. It reminds me of a circus. It reminds me of a wild, like a wild west where everyone can do anything without any repercussions.
The worst for me is the Royal Way with all the tourist shops. Exactly, that's really a horror.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you pair it with those vendors offering photos with wild animals and it's,
which you've also campaigned against.
Yes. We've also made a campaign against that. So that's maybe I wouldn't say that's the reason, but I don't enjoy walking down the streets when it's that overcrowded and over visualized.
Why do you think it is, though? Because I've often wondered, Prague is based on tourism. They need people to keep coming back. But still, they seem to not care that a lot of the city centre is ugly.
Yeah. I think that the people responsible for that, they are happy with the tourists, with the influx of tourists. And once they enter Prague, once they're here, they believe that the sole level of historic buildings, or the sole amount of historic buildings and historic geist all around, will somehow overwhelm them, and they will somehow forget about that, and they will see that as a wacky and quirky part of one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
In Ireland, where I come from, you can't just put up any kind of a shop front. There's some kind of a commission, and if you put up something really garish and ugly, well, you won't be allowed to put it up.
Yeah. Well, there are no repercussions for that, are they? There are no fines. There is just something, people just push the envelope, and they push the borders of what they can do, what's allowed, and what be maybe frowned upon, but not removed, and there will be no effect of their sort of a bad or unpleasant behavior towards the overall face of a city.
Also, Pavel, one of your interests is football.
Yeah.
And some time back you did a great project, creating football kits for an imaginary 1918 World Cup.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, which Prague club has the best strip?
Well, I was doing my homework before I came here, and I realized that my most favorite of them all is 2018 Bohemians Prague, where the stripes were surprisingly turned vertical. Which I like very much. So that's a very simple design, and I was checking all the historical and pseudo-historical kits of Prague teams, and it's always I'm not a big fan of those over retro, hyper retro approaches, such as having a laced collar or anything. I believe that's this time has already passed. So I'm a big fan of very simple, clever, not overwhelmed by sponsor logos pieces. Yeah, Bohemians are probably my favorite.
But aren't you a Slavia fan?
I am. However, their approach is very rigid and very historic. I love the club, but I'm not a big fan of the actual kit.
You also do album covers.
Yes.
You're a music fan. I also wanted to ask you, and I told you this in advance, what are your favorite Prague bands?
Obviously, Ecstasy of Santa Teresa, and I've always been a big fan of Tata Boys, which was a band that I've listened since my 15 years of age till now, and I'm in the middle of creating a very nice project with them. So if both sides would have enough time, I presume that's going to be an interesting outcome out of it.
Aren't you also doing album sleeves for reissues of Ecstasy of St. Teresa?
Yes, I am. That's something that's going to come out in the spring next year. They'll be re-releasing the 3 albums of theirs, and they'll be putting it in a nice collector's box, and I'll be designing the box.
And are there any other bands we haven't mentioned that we should?
I've been working for a long time with Navigators, which is now defunct band, which turned into Android Asteroid, which I also did all the designs and sleeves and posters for them. Unfortunately, they also broke up. But I'm being approached by many small or big bands, not just from Prague, and not just from the Czech Republic, together with film posters and book covers. That's like the third. That's a triangle of my favorite design works.
As I said earlier, you've worked for some huge international brands. Are you limiting your career by living here? I know you lived abroad previously.
No, every now and then I'm invited by the client or an agency to come abroad and work there with them on a particular project. But in the last years, and due to COVID, changes in the corporate behavior. I'm now working solely from Prague, from my desk and couch for the client from all around the world. So I'm actually looking forward to being invited somewhere by a client or an agency to actually see how the work is abroad.
I also saw a comment from you where you said that Czechs are particularly bad when it comes to doing ads for beer.
Yes.
Surely not.
Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, it's all of the visuals, all of the posters, all of the TV ads are the same. Unfortunately, it's always based and aiming at a ungraspable emotion that the corporate workers want you to achieve, they've made their Excel sheets and they've created a sort of a result dream that they want you to feel this and that while drinking the beer, and then they're pushing this emotion through the TV ads or posters. Unfortunately, in my professional opinion, it's not working at all.
And it's usually like four dudes having a beer together.
Yeah, exactly. Either four dudes or a unexpected couple, or maybe a family celebrating Christmas with a beer bottle and everything. So it's been the same for the last 20-25 years.
Well, maybe the Czech beer is so good that it sells itself.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they can maybe donate the broadcast time to someone else.
My final question for you, Pavel: if you could do any campaign for anything Czech related or Czech, what would it be?
I would actually enjoy very much working on a book or a large project connected to Czech or Czechoslovak football, which is a industry or resort that I enjoy very much. And also, I've just realized that what I always loved and fancied were those typically Czech tourist markers, those trail marks, especially the three-colored one, the tricolor one, and also the very vintage Krkonoše walking trail marks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So just have a look at that. Those are like simple violet symbols describing what trail are you on or what landmark are you facing towards. It's very clever and very interesting, and I haven't seen it anywhere else in the world.
Many thanks indeed to Pavel Fuksa for speaking to me for this edition of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you're new to the pod and enjoyed our conversation, why not check out some of the earlier editions of this series of interviews, of which around 120 are now available. And of course, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. But for now, that's all from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.